Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay City Council has decided to forego an interim turf sports field for the time being and has asked administration instead to immediately begin working on plans for a permanent structure. Councillors expressed no desire to shell out an estimated $5 to $9 million for a temporary facility that could be in use for as little as 2 years. But it's a tough pill to swallow for some user groups, which in the meantime still don't have a year-round place to participate in the sports they love. Ryan Bonazzo has more.
After being presented a number of options for an interim indoor turf facility, Council has decided those plans are too costly and has asked city staff to instead begin fleshing out a long-term solution. But for user groups like Soccer Northwest, that likely means at least 3 more years of waiting.
If the city was to say to us, we're a year or 2 years away from that, it's probably something we could swallow.
But President Michael Veneziale is deeply troubled that several years into the process, councillors can't even narrow down the type of facility they want to build.
I'm not looking at something necessarily that is going to last 35 years.
I don't want to see a bubble.
The scope is too broad, and like Council was saying, there's a lot of ideas out there of what they think they want, and I think that needs to be narrowed down.
More than 2 years ago, Council gave Soccer Northwest more than $100,000 for a business study on an indoor soccer complex. And last year, the group came forward with a $25 million proposal for Chapels Park. But that hasn't progressed any further. So recently, the group informally presented another option to the mayor.
We proposed an interim facility that can be built into a long-term facility, so it's essentially a stage process where three fields would essentially be built off the start, and then in the long term you can increase that to be 4 fields.
But that hasn't gone anywhere yet either, to Veneziale's increasing frustration.
We can't make the wrong decision in spite of what might feel like near-term pressure.
Morrow has made the project a priority since taking office. With $5 million already set aside, he also plans to bring forward a motion asking council to commit hotel tax money over the next 3 years. And he notes that the city is also in line to receive a nearly $7 million bump in gas tax funding this year from the federal government, as outlined in last week's budget.
You would now be at $15 million. That's money for sure that we would already have. That's without a tax increase, that's without touching a reserve, that's without levels of funding from the province or the Fed. Only to say we can do this.
But for athletes, it's happening far too slowly.
I'm talking more so about the younger kids, the younger adults that are looking to get scholarships and go away. We have a lot of that, and you're really messing up these children's opportunity to get free schooling out of this.
Ryan Bonazzo, TBT News.
Also last night, City Council reached a consensus with City Manager Norm Gale regarding terms of reference for a detailed audit of the city's programs and services. That decision was supposed to be made a week earlier, but councillors took issue with some of the proposed language in the request for proposal, which is essentially the job description used to attract interested consulting firms. The successful applicant will be charged with reviewing all 140 program and service areas laid out in the city services profile and make recommendations for enhancements or service reductions. The consultant will also review the organizational structure of the city, looking for efficiencies within departments. That was the piece many councillors thought was missing from the initial terms of reference. The city last conducted an internal review of this magnitude about 2 decades ago, but it was never in recent memory hired someone from outside to do the work.
Over 20 years since we've had a review of this type. Show me an organization that's over 20 years that doesn't take a look at what they do and how they do it. I think it should have been a long time ago, and I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we look at it and see if we're doing things properly, and if we are, good enough, but I'm sure that we're going to find some efficiencies.
Any opposed? The request for proposal will be issued very soon. The consultant is asked to prepare a preliminary report in time for next year's budget deliberations and a final report in time for the 2021 budget. Also last night came a report on councillor salaries and expenses from last year. Former Mayor Keith Hobbs led the way, taking home $88,000 while racking up an additional $7,200 in expenses. Councillors who were re-elected in October each made about $36,000 in base salary, taking home anywhere from $450 to $3,600 in expenses in 2018. The District Social Services Board has made some major financial cuts as their operating budget has been slashed by $6.5 million from a year ago. The decrease is due to reductions in 100% funded programs for childcare expansion and the termination of the Social Housing Apartment Improvement Program, among other cuts. DSAB Chair Lucy Kloosterhuis says despite the cut in the budget, the service to their clients will not be compromised.
There will not be any cuts to any of our clients, as they will continue, all the clients will continue to receive all the services that we've had in the past. Like you said, the one program will now be funneled through the CMHC because of the province deciding that's the way it will be funneled. The money is still going to be there for organizations to apply for the funding to build low-cost housing.
64% of the DSAB budget, which now sits at just over $100 million, will go towards transfer payments to individuals and families, along with agencies that provide social services. New numbers show some disturbing statistics about the opioid crisis in this province. Here in Ontario, close to 630 people died from opioid overdoses in the first 6 months of 2018. That's up 15% from the same period of time in 2017. Ontario has yet to announce its plans for overdose prevention sites after those licenses expire on Sunday. Sheldon Wabison, who had his 2015 manslaughter conviction overturned last year, was back in court today, but instead of having a new trial as scheduled, the 27-year-old pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. Wabison, shown on the left in this file footage, pleaded guilty to criminal negligence causing death and not guilty to the previous charge of manslaughter. Wabison had been found guilty by a jury for his alleged role in a 2011 incident on Minnesota Street that resulted in the death of 54-year-old Robert Topping. The victim died after intervening in a break-and-enter by 4 young men. Last month, the Ontario Court of Appeal overturned Wabison's conviction on the grounds that his statements were given to police involuntarily. A sentencing hearing on the new charge will take place tomorrow, with victim impact statements being delivered. Wabison is currently in custody. Well, the latest addition to the Confederation College campus is aimed at making the school more welcoming to the large Indigenous population enrolled there. The unveiling of a smudging room means students and staff have a space to connect with local Indigenous elders and traditions. Corey Nordstrom has more.
A smudging room to connect elders with Indigenous students and staff is the newest addition to Confederation College, an institute that for years has been looking at ways to highlight the traditional lands their campus lies on. A ceremony took place with a local elder who spoke of the importance of both the smudge and the relationship between Indigenous youth and elders. College President Kathleen Lynch says the space was designed for a number of uses, including prayer, ceremony, and reflection.
Been many years in the making and planning, and it was trying to find the right space and design it appropriately so that we had a dedicated space for smudging, but not just smudging, also to learn about other Indigenous cultural practices.
Tisa Fiddler of the Nagonawan Advisory Committee says with the space being both for Indigenous and non-Indigenous visitors alike, those unfamiliar with the culture can use it as a learning resource.
Thunder Bay is in a spotlight right now, and it's the perfect opportunity for us to encourage, to showcase the great work that's being done, and I really believe that Confederation College could be a model of that.
Confederation College has a number of areas on campus for Indigenous culture. In fact, the new smudging room now overlooks a space where a teepee is set up for cultural teachings in the summer months.
We have a number of spaces where we're promoting Indigenous practices and learning and support for our Indigenous students, which 1/3 of our college are Indigenous students, so we want them to feel welcome here.
Located in the southernmost end of the main Shunya building, the room is equipped with exhaust fans for those in adjacent spaces with sensitivities to smoke. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
And high school students from across the city gathered today for a youth empowerment conference. The event, which was hosted by Lakehead Public Schools, was aimed at showing teenagers how they can make an impact in the community at a young age. Ben Nesbitt has the story.
High school students and school board reps filed into the Victoria Park Training Center for a conference that focused on youth empowerment, activism, and volunteerism. The event featured guest speakers and presentations from board members aimed at showing the students the importance of getting involved in the community. The mind behind the conference was student trustee Jamie Plater, who spoke on the importance of getting involved at a young age.
So it's a lot not only about helping the community and improving yourself, but it's about self-discovery as well. And I think it's super important that students get the opportunity to take these volunteer opportunities and just better themselves as people and then learn more about themselves as they go through.
One of the guest speakers was Executive Director of the Urban Abbey Youth Shelter, Adam Shank, who touched on the significance of making an impact in the community.
The young people that are at this conference today are the ones that are going to be leading our community in so many different ways, and I think that the sooner you're able to start, the better, because they're taking ownership. They're taking ownership of their community, and I think it's fantastic that they're doing it already at such a young age.
12th grade Hammarskjold student Katie Kawahara helped put the conference together and feels her generation has the potential to bring a different dynamic to the city.
Bringing a new, fresh perspective of these students, because especially in the new age of media and using social media, our youth nowadays have a completely new perspective on how they would approach problems. And with a world increasingly trying to improve our human rights and so many other things, it's important to get new perspectives.
Ben Nesbitt, TBT News.